Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the channel and welcome back to another Borderlands 3 video. Today we're going to be talking about the main character that I plan to play in Borderlands 3. Of course, I had an idea of who I wanted to play back when the characters were first revealed, but now that we have trailers for all of them and the skill trees are all available, we get to see all the action skills and the benefits and the bonuses and all that stuff, I have come to my conclusion. I'm going to be playing Flak when it comes to Borderlands 3. Now you guys know I loved playing Krieg in Borderlands 2. He was a very fun and unique character, but when it comes to Borderlands 3, I want a different kind of experience, right? Whereas Krieg was really good at doing AoE damage and of course melee and fire damage, and he's a really fun character, I wanted something a bit different, and Flak definitely provides that here in Borderlands 3. Now, if you guys don't know, these skill trees for each character are available over on the Borderlands website. I'll put a link to each of them down there in the description, and over the past few days, I have just been messing around with these different skill trees. I've been trying out so many different builds, and I found one that I really like for Flak, and I want to share that with you guys here in this video. So Flak is known as the Beastmaster, right? He's also kind of touted as the Sniper, which makes sense for like a Beastmaster slash Hunter character, though I don't think I'm going to be really building him as much of a Sniper, but rather I'm going to build him as a full Beastmaster and just have pets all the freaking time, just constantly have them running around, giving me bonuses, having me heal them, and just it's going to be a really interesting gameplay experience that I don't think we've ever really had in the Borderlands franchise. My first ever character was Mordecai way back in Borderlands 1, and of course you had Bloodwing, that was fun, but you really didn't have too much control and you basically just threw him out every now and then. Well here, my goodness guys, there is so much you can do with the different pets and the different abilities. If you guys don't know, there are 3 different pets to choose from, and they all give you different benefits. You have the Scag, which is going to increase your base damage, and also when you use an attack command, it's going to vomit acid on the enemies, which I think is pretty cool. We have the Jabber, which is basically going to be this guy that runs around with a pistol and increases your base movement speed, and when you give him attack command, he's going to throw a radiation barrel at the enemies. And over here, of course, we have the Spider Ant, who is going to constantly regenerate your health, and it's also going to charge into enemies when you give it an attack command. They all sound really cool, and you can definitely augment them different ways to make them even more powerful and bigger and different, but for me, at least when the game first comes out, I have to go with the Scag, right? The Scag is iconic to the Borderlands universe. Like, I remember seeing Skags as soon as I got out of Firestone, and just Skags are a big part of the Borderlands franchise for me, and having a pet Scag, especially one that you can pet, that's going to be pretty freaking cool, right? So I'm definitely going with the Scag, and plus, I like the idea of having increased damage as compared to regenerating health, and of course, moving faster like you get with the other pets that are available. Now, what's cool about this is not only do you get a pet that has a different ability and gives you a different benefit, but you can also pick an action skill. You have Gamma Burst, you have Fade Away, which is definitely an interesting ability. I like that quite a bit, but you also have Rack Attack, and if I'm going for a Beastmaster build here, I'm definitely going to be taking Rack Attack. It's an ability that has multiple charges, and it sends forth 2 racks that dive bomb your enemies. So think about that. We're going to be running around with a Scag pet attacking enemies and sending racks to attack enemies. That's pretty freaking cool, but we're going to be building further into that later on. But for right now, let's go over here to the Master Tree, because this is where we're going to be putting a lot of our skill points into. The first skill I want to take is going to be a passive one, Persistence Hunter. You just 3 out of 3 that. It's going to give you 12% increased base gun damage, as well as 45% increased action skill duration, which means those racks are going to be dive bombing more, and of course your base guns are going to be a lot better, which is definitely helpful in the early game. Now after that, I'm going over here to Ferocity. I feel as though when it comes to most builds, you should probably be taking 5 out of 5 on this, because it's going to take your pet's damage and increase it by 50. So that's pretty freaking powerful. Your pet's doing damage, you're doing damage. Why not have your pet be 50% more effective in those combat scenarios? Now over here, we're going to be taking Go for the Eyes, but only 2 of them, because this is actually an interesting ability. When Flak's pet attacks an enemy, the first melee attack is always a critical hit that does increase damage, right? So if you 2 out of 5 that, you're going to be getting 30% increased critical hit damage on that first melee attack. Now, keep in mind, if you do decide to go over here with the Jabber, he uses guns, right? He uses pistols, and you can upgrade him to use submachine guns and also a big club later on, or a shotgun, but basically, that melee attack, he doesn't really do that all that much. So this is not going to be a good talent to take if you decide to go with the Jabber. Of course, it's going to be pretty good if you take the Spider Ant, but I figure it's a good ability to take right now, and we're only going to be taking 205 on it because it's not going to be effective in all situations. If you're taking on one enemy, then sure, that's going to be okay, but it's only essentially one melee swing from your pet that does that increased damage. If you're taking on a bunch of enemies, this is going to be a lot better because as your pet goes from enemy to enemy, it's going to constantly refresh this and have that different critical hit bonus every single time. But we're only taking 2 out of 5 because, again, I messed around with these builds so many times, and 2 is basically what we need if we want to get all the way down here to the dominant skill. But moving along here, we're going to be taking 5 out of 5 here on Who Rescued Who. Basically, when your pet deals damage, Flak regenerates health, and when Flak deals damage, the pet regenerates health. 5% of your damage dealt is going to go into your pet's health, which means all the time, as long as you're shooting like a submachine gun or even an assault rifle or what have you, all the damage you're doing is constantly healing your pet, and when your pet's dealing damage, which should be all the time, you're constantly regenerating 2% of your maximum health, which is definitely pretty good. Now, over here, we're going to be going towards Frenzy. Once again, 5 out of 5 on that. Basically, when Flak's pet deals damage, Flak and the pet get a stack of Frenzy, and that can stack up to 10 times, and for each stack you have, you deal 4% increased damage. Not only you, but your pet as well, and assuming the fight isn't over instantly, you should be at 10 stacks pretty quickly, which means you and your pet pretty much all the time are going to be doing 40% more damage. Definitely pretty freaking cool. Now, speaking of cool, we have an ability here called Psycho Head on a Stick, which is a kill skill. Whenever Flak kills an enemy, their pet gains increased movement speed and damage for a few seconds. You can only do 1 out of 1 here, but if you get the kill, not your pet, if Flak gets the kill, then the pet's doing 10% more damage from there on out for a little bit, as well as it's going to be moving around a lot faster. Definitely a nice little ability to have. Now, after that, we're going to be going down here towards Mutated Defenses. Now, hopefully this is not coming to play too often. When Flak's pet is at low health, it's going to gain a 30% damage reduction bonus, and it's also going to regenerate 40% of its maximum health. Now, this does have a cooldown, but the idea is you need your pet to be alive for a lot of these abilities to actually take effect. So if your pet's constantly dying, that's not going to work out. We're taking Mutated Defenses just to make sure that our pet actually stays alive. Next up, we have Pack Tactics here. This is a really freaking good talent. I mean, just basically, it's kind of a boring talent. It doesn't really change your gameplay whatsoever, but it's going to increase the damage of Flak and his pet by 15%, as well as both of them are going to have 15% increased maximum health, more damage. Definitely a pretty awesome ability. Just take it. It's really freaking good. Now, finally, the last talent we're going to be taking here on the Master Tree is going to be Dominance. This is one of the main reasons why I want to play as Flak. This is such a cool ability. It's a melee override skill that makes it so when you melee a target, you're going to take control of that target, essentially, right? It's going to become your ally for a short period of time, but if you do it to a beast, that duration is going to be doubled. So hypothetically, you run up to a Psycho, you melee him, that Psycho is going to be on your side and fighting for you for 12 seconds, and during that time, he's going to constantly lose his health until he dies or the effect ends, and when the effect ends, of course, you'll probably have to kill him, but if you do it to a beast, you're going to have that dominance for 24 seconds. So you have your Scag, you go find a Spider Ant or something like that somewhere, you melee it, now suddenly that Spider Ant's also fighting for you for 24 seconds, and during that time, it's going to lose 2% of its maximum health every second, so it's not going to be there really all that much, but still, it's a really cool ability where you can basically just dominate different things on the battlefield and have them fight for you, so you have more pets and more things going on. I definitely think that's pretty awesome. Now, before we go away here from the Master Tree, we're going to be doing some augments to our pets, right? So as you guys can see, if we would have taken Gamma Burst as our action skill, we have different augments that we can do to that particular action skill. Well, because we didn't take it, we're not going to be bothering with these, but we did take the Scag, which means we have 2 different choices here available to us as to how we want to augment our Scag pet. The first one is going to be Great Horn Scag, which basically takes your lovable small little Scag and turns it into a Great Horn Scag, which is going to further increase Flak's damage and his gun damage, and when you issue an attack command, the Great Horn Scag is going to charge at enemies and knock them into the air. So basically, you get 10% increased gun damage, more damage overall, although I'm not sure if you look at it, like right there, it says 5 damage, that's what it's giving you. It also says that for the regular guard Scag, so I wonder if it's actually going to increase, or if it's just showing that you still have that base 5 extra damage by having your Scag. I'm not entirely sure, but you get 10% increased gun damage. Definitely sounds pretty nice, but the other one here also sounds pretty good. Iridian Scag. Flak Scag turns into an Iridian Scag, which will increase Flak's damage and his fire rate, and the attack command is going to cause the Iridian Scag to pull enemies nearby with a singularity. Now, the reason why I'm going to be going with the Great Horn Scag instead is because I feel as though having the 10% increased gun damage is better than having 5% increased fire rate, even though the attack command for the Iridian is a bit better than the Great Horn Scag. The Horn Scag is going to charge them and knock them in the air, whereas this one's going to suck them all together, which makes it a lot easier to do a bunch of damage. But I like the idea more of having just a bigger Scag as compared to like an irradiated, like Iridian Scag. It's kind of weird if you ask me. I don't know, maybe I get too much into the game in that respect, but I feel as though the Great Horn Scag is going to be a pretty freaking awesome ability. Now, moving on over here, we are going to be putting some more points here into the Hunter tree. Now, what Hunter is going to do is it's going to allow us to further augment our rack attack action skill, as well as just make Flak even more powerful. So the first one we're going to be 5 out of 5ing is going to be Interplanetary Stalker, which is a kill skill that basically gives you a bunch of different abilities. It's actually pretty freaking nuts. So how this works is you're going to get up to 3 stacks of this Interplanetary Stalker whenever you get kills, which is going to increase your damage by 10% per stack. So if you have 3 stacks, you're doing 30% increased damage, but there's a caveat to that. Depending on the kind of enemy that you kill, you get additional benefits. So again, hypothetically, you have all 3 of your stacks. On top of that, if you kill a human, on top of your 30% increased damage, you're going to have up to 45% action skill damage, again, depending on how many stacks you have. If you're killing a robot, you're going to have up to, what would that be, 22.5% corrosive damage, depending on how many stacks you have. That's pretty freaking good. And if you're killing a beast, you can have up to 21% increased movement speed as well. So you have a bunch of gun damage, your action skills are going to do more damage, or your corrosive damage is going to be better, or your movement speed is going to be better, depending on what kind of enemy you're actually taking out. Definitely a very interesting ability right there. Next up, we're going to be going towards Hunter's Eye. 5 out of 5 on that as well. Basically, when you're taking on different kinds of enemies, you get different kinds of benefits. If you're taking on humans, you get 15% increased critical hit damage. If you're taking on robots, you do 30% more damage to their armor. And if you're taking on beasts, you take almost 22% less damage from them, which definitely sounds pretty good. Now, this next ability, you can kind of see like the similarities between Flak and Zero from Borderlands 2. Well, Two Fang was an ability for Zero in Borderlands 2, but fun fact, when it came to Two Fang, oh, I wish I could actually like hover my mouse over it, but apparently I can't. When it came to Two Fang, the O in 2 was actually a 0, whereas here in Borderlands 3 for Flak, the A in Fang is going to be a 4 because Flak is spelled with a 4 in it. But regardless, it's going to be an ability that makes it so every time you fire your weapon, you have a 25% chance to fire an extra projectile, which is obviously pretty freaking good. Now, the final abilities we're going to be taking, as you guys can see, we only have 7 skill points left, is we're going to be putting 3 into Big Game, which is going to make it so our Hunter skill effects are going to be 30% more effective and have a 100% increased duration. Now, these Hunter skill effects, we have a bunch of them, and they actually outline them all right here. Here's a Hunter kill skill right there, so Interplanetary Stalker is actually going to be able to benefit from that. If we go back to the Master Tree here, Frenzy, for example, is also going to get the benefit, which means we're going to have the increased duration of this, which means we're going to stay at 10 stacks even higher. You have a bunch of these different Hunter skills that we've actually taken here, and that's going to make it a little bit better. And then the final 2 points we're going to end up putting into the Most Dangerous Game. What a crazy, crazy ability this is. So it's a Hunter kill skill. Whenever Flak, not his pet, but Flak kills a badass or stronger enemy, they gain increased critical hit damage, gun damage, and handling for a long time. And as you guys can see, that long time is 2 minutes. That's absurd in Borderlands time. So if you kill a badass of any kind, you're doing 17% increased gun damage, 6.7% increased critical hit damage, and your weapons handle 25% better for 2 minutes. And in addition to that, you also get a cash reward from the Intergalactic Bureau of Bounty Hunting. So definitely a really cool ability. The reason why we didn't go to 3 out of 3 here is mostly because it doesn't really benefit us that much. You get a bit of extra gun damage, a bit of extra critical hit damage, but the duration stays the same, and we're basically out of skill points at this point in our video because we need to save these final 2 for actually augmenting our action skill. But keep in mind, if history is any indicator within the Borderlands franchise, I mean, they're going to release level increases, right? That's going to be a thing in the future, and when that happens, you can 3 out of 3 that. You can go down here and take Galactic Shadow. You can go and get Megavore, which is a really cool ability that makes increases. So basically, anytime you shoot an enemy anywhere on any part of their body, you have a 20% chance for that to actually be a crit. Then, of course, you can increase your crit damage up here, of course, when no enemies are nearby. So if you're sticking back a little bit, you do a bunch of extra critical hit damage. There's a bunch of extra amazing talents we could take, but right now, we're basically out of skill points, so we're going to have to wait until the level cap increases are released at some point in the Borderlands 3 life cycle. But with our final 2 skill points, we have 2 more augments over here for our action skill. We're going to be taking Flock and Load. Very cool. It's going to send forth an additional rack. So instead of sending 2 of them to dive bomb enemies, we're going to be sending 3 of them now. And then we're also going to be taking Rackcelerate, which is going to increase the cooldown rate and give you an additional charge of your rack dive ability. So now we have 3 charges of it. Each one of those charges is going to be cooling down 20% faster, and each one of those abilities is going to send out 3 racks as compared to 2. Definitely pretty cool if you ask me. And yeah, guys, just so far, and I know that we're basically just sitting here talking about talents and abilities and stuff like that, but I'm super excited about this game. After sitting here for days just messing around with different abilities and different action skills and stuff like that, I really like the setup that I have here. I really do. I think this is going to be the way I go when the game actually first comes out. Now, of course, it could change. When the game comes out and I find that my guard Scag is just constantly dying, then maybe I'm going to take some points out of damage and put them more into healing up my pet to keep my pet alive and things like that. Or any other number of things could happen, but just based on what we know so far, based on these skill trees and what we know about Flak, this looks like it's going to be a really fun way to play it. We're going to be running around with a great Horn Scag, and we're going to be using our dominance ability to have an additional pet, and we're going to have 3 charges of Rack Dive, which each sends out 3 racks to attack the target. And I think there's a nice combination of unique gameplay, while at the same time I feel as though there's a lot of increased damage here. Like, so many things here are going to be increasing the damage of Flak as well as his pet, and we're going to be constantly healing each other as we're doing that damage. Like, I can really see Flak being a very, very fun character in Borderlands 3, which is why I am going to be maining him. But what's really cool about this as well is you may feel like in the previous Borderlands games that you were kind of forced into a cookie cutter build to get the most effectiveness out of your character. Well, here in Borderlands 3, we have so many different talents. I mean, for example, even just playing as Flak, we have 3 different pets to go with, and then each one of those pets has up to 3 different versions of themselves. They have an original version, and then another version, and a third version, and each one of them is going to be different and give you different benefits and bonuses. Then we have 3 different action skills as well, which is pretty freaking cool, and then up to 4 different augments on each one of those action skills. There's a lot to do here in this game. I mean, you guys know me. I played a bunch of Krieg in Borderlands 2, and I love Krieg to death, but what sucks about Krieg is if you're not going with a melee build, his action skill was useless. Buzzax Rampage was completely useless if you wanted to go for a gun build of any kind with him. You never press your ability. Whereas if Krieg was actually in this game, he would have up to 3 different action skills that he could use and then further augment to make more effective. So a gun Krieg could be a little bit better because he would actually have an action skill. Whereas everyone else is using their action skills, Krieg never really got to do that. But ladies and gentlemen, this is definitely a really cool character here in Borderlands 3. And I would love to hear down there in the comments, how do you plan to build your Flak if you plan on playing Flak? But if you don't plan on playing Flak, what other Vault Hunter are you going to be going with, and why are you picking that character? Leave your thoughts and feedback down there in the comments. Thank you guys all so much for listening, and I hope you guys all have a wonderful day.